Some stories find us when we need them most. This one came to me from a wildlife ranger in Tanzania, a man who spent 8 years watching the savannah and learning its quiet lessons. He told me about a morning that changed how he understood love, loss, and the strange ways grace finds us when we've stopped looking for it. I share it now because I believe it carries something true, something about mothers and children, about the ones who stay when others walk away, about second chances that arrive disguised as ordinary days. If you've ever wondered whether your struggles matter, whether anyone sees you fighting this story is for you, it's for all of us who've learned that strength sometimes means asking for help, and that the bravest thing we can do is keep reaching for each other. Pull up a chair. Let me tell you what happened. The lioness's eyes held no fierceness, only fear. She lay chest deep in red mud, a sinkhole disguised as solid ground. The dried crust had betrayed her mid-stride, and now the earth gripped her like a fist. Every breath drew the clay higher against her ribs. Her roars had faded an hour ago. She had nothing left. At the edge of the pit, a cub paced, back and forth, tiny paw prints pressed into dust, going nowhere, 50 meters away. The pride watched. 7 lions, still as stones. The dominant male stepped forward, tested the ground with his paw. The crust cracked beneath his weight. He stepped back, one by one. They turned, walked into the tall grass, vanished. The cub did not follow. She looked at her mother, only nostrils and eyes above the surface now, looked at the empty savannah, looked back at her mother. Then, driven by something older than thought, she bolted not toward the pride, but toward the only movement left in her shrinking world, the distant rumble of an engine. If this story has already stirred something quiet in your heart, I'd love to know where you're joining us from today. Sometimes the smallest connections remind us we're not alone. Thomas Callahan gripped the steering wheel with both hands. The Land Cruiser shuddered over a rut, and coffee sloshed in the dented tin cup wedged against the dashboard. He didn't reach for it. His eyes stayed on the track ahead, 6:15 a.m. The sun hung low, throwing long shadows from the acacia trees. Grass stretched in every direction dry, pale, the color of old wheat. The air smelled of dust and something else. Dung, maybe. The clean, ancient smell of a land that had been here long before him and would remain long after. He hadn't slept well. Same dream. His mother's voice on the answering machine, the one he'd saved for 3 years before the phone finally died. Just calling to hear your voice. Tommy, call me back when you can. He never called back. The phone sat in his glove compartment now. Dead battery, cracked screen. He couldn't throw it away, couldn't charge it either. Some things you just carry. Thomas rolled down the window. Let the morning air hit his face. Cool now. In 2 hours. The heat would press down like a hand on his chest. But now, it was almost pleasant. A herd of wildebeest crossed the track ahead. He stopped, counted them through the dusty windshield. 14 adults, 3 calves keeping close to their mothers. The radio crackled. Thomas, you're running late. Derek's voice, young, clipped. Morning reports due at 9. Thomas watched the last calf stumble over a root, then right itself. Its mother didn't slow down. The calf ran harder. Copy, Thomas said. I'll be there. He didn't reach for the gear shift. Not yet. 8 years he'd been out here. 8 years of morning patrols, watering hole checks, radio reports filed on time. The other rangers called him the patient one. He'd tracked a limping zebra for 2 days once, just to make sure it didn't need intervention. It didn't. He went home. That was the job. Watching. Waiting. Being there when it mattered. He took a sip of cold coffee. Set the cup back down. Something caught his eye. To the east. Vultures. 12 of them. Maybe more. Circling low. Too low. Thomas's hands tightened on the wheel. That many birds meant something was dying. Or already dead. He turned the Land Cruiser off the main track and headed east. Thomas rounded the bend and slammed the brakes. A lion cub stood in the middle of the track. Small, shaking, her chest heaved with rapid breaths and her eyes wide, Wild fixed on the Land Cruiser without flinching. Thomas's foot hovered over the accelerator. His gaze swept the grass on both sides. Tall, dense. Anything could be hiding there. "Where's your mother?" He waited. The engine idled. The cub didn't move. She was young, 4 months, maybe less. Her coat still carried the faint spots of infancy, but something was wrong. She wasn't frozen in fear. She wasn't running. She paced 3 steps left, 3 steps right, then bolted 10 meters down the track before stopping and looking back. Not at him, past him, then toward the east again. Thomas opened the door. Slowly, the hinges creaked. The cub flinched, ran another 20 meters, stopped, looked back again. Every protocol said the same thing. Do not follow unknown lion activity alone. Radio for backup. Wait. But the vultures were still circling to the east, and this cub kept running in that direction, stopping, looking back, running again, not toward him, not away from him, toward something else. Thomas got back in the truck. He followed. She ran ahead, glancing back every few seconds, not leading panicking. The Land Cruiser pushed through grass tall enough to scrape the windows. Seeds and dust clouded the air. Thomas could taste it dry. Bitter, coating his tongue. 500 meters, 1,000. Then he saw it. The sinkhole opened in the earth like a wound. Red clay walls sloped down into a pit of thick mud, and in the center, half submerged, lay the lioness. Thomas stopped the truck. Cut the engine. She was massive. Even trapped, her power was undeniable, but the mud had risen to her chest, and her head hung low, nostrils barely clearing the surface. Each breath sent small ripples across the red-brown muck. She saw the truck, For one moment, her eyes flared, pupils contracting, muscles tensing beneath the mud. The old instinct, threat, but she had nothing left. The fire died. Her head dropped lower. Thomas's throat tightened. He had seen many things in 8 years. Drought that turned watering holes to dust, poaching wounds that no medicine could heal, disease that swept through herds like wind through grass. But he had never seen a lioness stop fighting. The cub ran to the edge of the pit, lay flat on her belly, stretched one small paw toward the mud. The gap was too wide. She couldn't reach. She tried again, and again. Her claws scraped the dry earth, leaving thin grooves in the clay. Thomas's hand shook as he reached for the radio. "Base, this is Callahan." His voice came out rough. He cleared his throat. "I've got a lioness trapped in a sinkhole. East sector, about 2 kilometers off the main track. Requesting immediate rescue support." Static. A long pause. Then Derek's voice. "What resources are you requesting? Crane, winch cables, vet team for sedation." Another pause. Longer this time. "Thomas, that's significant resource allocation. We've got a tourist convoy with a flat tire near the north gate, and Dr. Thornton is scheduled for the elephant vaccination program this morning. I can't just—" "She's dying. Derek." The words came out harder than he intended, and he watched the lioness through the windshield. Her breathing had slowed. Each exhale seemed to cost her something. "Lions die every day. Thomas," Derek's voice was careful now, measured. "It's what happens out here. Natural selection. We can't intervene in every— This isn't natural selection. This is a sinkhole. A trap. She fell through and she can't get out. Even so, the resources you're asking for." Thomas's grip tightened on the radio. The plastic creaked under his fingers. At the edge of the pit, the cub was still reaching, still trying. Her small body pressed flat against the ground, one paw extended as far as it could go. The gap remained. Impossible. Unbridgeable. But she didn't stop. Thomas lifted the radio again. "Derek, I've been out here 8 years. I've never asked for a full rescue deployment. Not once. I'm asking now." Silence on the other end. Thomas watched the mud creep higher against the lioness's neck, watched the cub's paw scrape uselessly at the air, watched the vultures circling overhead, patient as stones. "Not this one," he said. "Not today." The radio crackled. Derek's voice came back, tight with something Thomas couldn't name. "I'll send what I can, but I'm coming out there myself first. I need to see what we're dealing with before I authorize anything." The line went dead. Thomas set down the radio. His hand was still trembling. 45 minutes. That's how long it would take Derek to get here, maybe longer if he took the main road. He looked at the lioness, at the mud now touching her jaw. She didn't have 45 minutes. Derek's Land Cruiser pulled up 43 minutes later. Thomas had counted every one of them. Watching the mud rise another inch against the lioness's jaw, the younger ranger stepped out. Tall, clean-shaven, his boots hit the ground with precision. He walked to the edge of the sinkhole, hands on his hips, and stood there for a long moment without speaking. "You've got to be kidding me." Thomas didn't look at him. His eyes stayed on the lioness. "She's still breathing. For now." Derek pointed at the mud. "Look at that ground. Unstable for 30 meters in every direction. We put heavy equipment out there. We lose the crane, we lose the crew, maybe worse. Then we find another way." "With what?" Derek's voice sharpened. "Hope, good intentions." Thomas finally turned. The sun was higher now, pressing heat against the back of his neck. Sweat traced a line down his spine. "My mother died alone." The words came out quiet, steady. "In a hospital in Montana. I was on a plane when it happened, 3 hours from landing. The nurses told me later she asked for me. Twice." Derek's jaw tightened. He said nothing. "I didn't make it. Not even close." Thomas's hands hung at his sides. His fingers curled, then uncurled. "And I have spent every day since then promising myself I would never let something die alone if I could do anything about it. Anything at all." Derek's expression shifted. Something flickered behind his eyes, not sympathy. Something harder, older. "My father said the same thing." His voice was flat now, controlled. "You know where it got him, dead in a ditch in Kenya, shot twice in the chest because he couldn't walk away from a rhino." Thomas looked at him, really looked. The rigid posture, the clenched jaw, the way Derek's hands had balled into fists at his sides. "I'm sorry about your father. I don't need sorry." Derek's chin lifted. "I need you to understand that caring too much gets people killed." A third engine rumbled in the distance. Both men turned. The vehicle that emerged from the tall grass was older than Thomas's dented, dust-covered, held together by determination and welding. It stopped 10 meters away. Dr. Margaret Thornton stepped out. She was 61 years old, silver hair pulled back in a practical bun, reading glasses on a beaded chain around her neck. She carried a medical bag over one shoulder, and she moved with the unhurried certainty of someone who had seen everything twice. "Well." She surveyed the sinkhole, the lioness, the cub still pressed flat at the edge. "This is a mess." She walked past Derek without acknowledgement, knelt at the rim of the pit, studied the mud, the angle of the walls, the position of the trapped animal. "How long has she been down?" "At least 3 hours now," Thomas said. "The mud's rising from below. Groundwater seepage, I think. Her struggling is making it worse." Maggie picked up a handful of earth from the stable ground near her knee, rubbed it between her fingers, brought it to her nose. "High iron clay. This stuff sets like cement once it starts drying on the hide." She looked at Derek. "We work fast, or we don't work at all." Derek stepped forward. "Dr. Thornton, with respect, the ground conditions here make a full rescue operation extremely risky. The resource allocation alone, sun." Maggie stood, brushed red dust from her palms. Her voice stayed level, almost gentle. "I've been doing this 40 years. Lost more animals than you've ever treated." She paused. Let that settle. "Know what keeps me up at night? Not the ones I lost." She held his gaze. "The ones I didn't try for." She reached for the radio on her belt, lifted it to her mouth. "Headquarters, this is Thornton. I'm authorizing full rescue deployment to East Sector, mobile crane, winch cables, canvas tarps, emergency platform materials. Minimum 6 additional personnel. Now." Static, then a voice Thomas didn't recognize. "Copy. Dr. Thornton. Equipment en route. ETA approximately 1 hour." Maggie clipped the radio back to her belt, turned to Thomas. "Show me what we're working with." Together, they walked the perimeter of the sinkhole. Maggie tested the ground every few meters, pressing her boot down, feeling for give. Thomas pointed out the areas that had cracked when the Lioness first fell through. Derek stood apart, arms crossed, watching. The cub hadn't moved from her position at the edge. Her paw still stretched toward the mud, toward her mother. The gap between them hadn't changed. Thomas crouched beside her. She flinched, but didn't run. "It's okay," he said, more to himself than to her. "Help is coming." Maggie appeared at his shoulder. Her eyes moved from the cub to the Lioness to the slowly rising mud. "Thomas." Her voice was low, just for him. "That mud's at her jaw now. Sedation takes 15 minutes to work, and I can't dart her until the crane's in position." He looked at her. "What are you saying?" Maggie's gaze stayed on the Lioness, on the shallow, labored breaths sending ripples across the red-brown surface. "I'm saying we might have less time than an hour." The convoy appeared on the horizon at 10:47 a.m. Thomas had been watching for it, shading his eyes against the climbing sun. 3 vehicles. The mobile crane came first, a heavy-duty rig mounted on a flatbed truck, its yellow arm folded like a sleeping insect. Behind it, a supply truck loaded with wooden planks, canvas tarps, cables, and equipment boxes. Last, a personnel carrier with 6 figures visible through the dusty windows. The ground trembled as they approached. Thomas felt it through the soles of his boots. The Lioness felt it too. Her head lifted. Her eyes tracked the movement of the machines, and for one terrible moment, her muscles tensed beneath the mud. She tried to lunge. The clay held her fast, and she sank another 2 inches. "Easy," Thomas whispered. "Easy." Maggie was already moving. She intercepted the convoy 200 meters from the sinkhole, waving them to a stop. Thomas could hear her voice carrying across the flat ground firm, precise, directing the crane operator to approach from the north where the soil looked more stable. Derek walked the perimeter, checking sight lines. His radio crackled with updates from headquarters. Tourist convoy situation resolved. Elephant vaccination rescheduled. All resources now committed to East Sector. He didn't look at Thomas. The crane crawled into position. 50 meters from the pit, 40. At 30 meters, the operator cut the engine and climbed down. "That's as close as I can get." He was a heavyset man named Samuel, sweat already darkening his collar. "Any closer, and we're sitting on the same unstable ground she's in." Thomas walked to the supply truck, grabbed the first wooden plank. It was 8 feet long, heavy with moisture from the morning dew. He carried it toward the sinkhole. "What's the plan?" Derek had appeared beside him. "We build a platform. Extend it out from stable ground toward the pit. Distribute the weight so nobody breaks through. And if the platform fails," Thomas set down the plank, went back for another, "then we build a better one." The work began. 4 rangers laid planks in an overlapping pattern, testing each section before adding more weight. Thomas hammered stakes into the earth to anchor the structure. His shoulders burned. Sweat dripped from his chin, leaving dark spots on the wood. The lioness watched them. Every clang of the hammer made her flinch. Every shout made her tense. And every time she tensed, she sank a little deeper. Maggie crouched at the edge of the platform, tranquilizer rifle across her knees. She was calculating angles, distance, wind, speed. "I need to get closer." She shook her head. "Another 10 feet, at least." "We're working on it." The planks extended outward, foot by foot. The structure groaned beneath the weight of the workers. Thomas paused to wipe his forehead. His shirt was soaked through. The sun had climbed to its zenith, and the heat pressed down on everything like a physical weight. He could smell the mud, now rich, metallic, thick with iron. The cub hadn't moved. She lay at the original edge of the pit, belly flat against the ground, one paw still extended toward her mother. Her eyes were half closed. Exhaustion. Probably. Or something worse. Thomas walked over, knelt beside her. She didn't flinch this time, didn't even look at him. He'd brought water, a shallow bowl from the supply truck. He set it down near her muzzle. She didn't drink. "I know." He kept his voice low. The words weren't for her. Not really. They were for himself, for the silence that needed filling. "I know." Behind him, Maggie and Derek were talking. He could hear fragments of their conversation carrying on the still air. "Think Thomas is being reckless." Derek's voice. "Do you now?" Maggie's tone was mild, unimpressed. "He's emotional. He's making decisions based on feelings instead of, 'My husband died 2 years ago.'" Maggie's voice cut through, quiet but absolute. "Heart attack at the breakfast table. He was reaching for the butter, 62 years old. Gone before I could cross the kitchen." Silence from Derek. "After that, I had 2 choices." She paused. "Decide nothing matters because everything ends. Or decide everything matters for the same reason." Another pause. "What Thomas is doing out there, that's not reckless." Her voice softened. "It's the only sane response I know." Thomas didn't turn around. He stayed with the cub. Let the words settle. The platform was nearly complete. Maggie rose, walked out onto the wooden structure. It creaked beneath her weight, but held. She stopped 15 feet from the lioness, knelt, and raised the tranquilizer rifle to her shoulder. The dart hit the lioness in the neck. She roared a sound so deep and raw that it stopped every worker mid-motion. Birds erupted from the grass. The cub scrambled to her feet, but the lioness had nothing left to fight with. The sound died. Her eyes grew heavy. Her massive head sank toward the mud. "Now!" Thomas shouted. "Get the cables on her now!" 3 workers rushed forward with the harness straps and canvas, improvised but strong. They worked the rigging under her forelegs, around her chest, moving fast. The mud sucked at their boots. One man nearly fell. Samuel started the crane. The engine roared. The cable went taut. The mud resisted. The lioness didn't move. The cable stretched tighter. The platform groaned. Then a crack. The sound split the air. One of the support planks snapped clean in half. The platform lurched. Workers scrambled back. The crane operator cut the tension, but too late. The cable went slack. The harness slipped, and the lioness sank. The mud rose to her ears. Her nostrils barely cleared the surface. Each breath blew small bubbles in the red-brown muck. "Everyone back," Derek was shouting. "Clear the platform, now." The workers retreated. The structure swayed, half collapsed, wood jutting at angles. Thomas stood at the broken edge, staring down at the lioness. His hands hung at his sides. His chest felt hollow. Not again. Please, not again. Movement at the corner of his vision. The cub. She had walked onto the damaged platform. Her small paws picked across the broken wood, finding gaps, testing weight. She was heading for the mud, for her mother. "No!" Thomas lunged forward. The platform shifted beneath him. He grabbed the cub by the scruff of her neck and pulled her back. She twisted. Her jaws snapped. Teeth sank into the meat of his palm. Pain lanced up his arm. Blood welled between his fingers, bright against the dust and mud. He didn't let go. He held her against his chest, one arm wrapped around her small body, blood dripping down his wrist. She struggled, clawed at his forearm. He could feel her heart pounding against his ribs fast, terrified, wild. "Not you too." The words came out in a whisper, rough, barely audible. "Not you too." Maggie was beside him, hands reaching for the cub. "Let me take her, Thomas, let me take her." He released the cub into Maggie's arms, stepped back, looked down at his hand. The bite was deep. 2 puncture wounds, clean and precise. Blood ran down his fingers, dripped onto the wooden planks, soaked into the grain. He didn't wrap it, didn't even wipe it clean. Behind him, the lioness's breathing had slowed. Shallow gasps, long pauses between them. Derek approached. His face was pale, his clipboard hung forgotten at his side. "Thomas, the platform's compromised. The crane can't get close enough without the support structure. We'd need an hour to rebuild, maybe more." Thomas looked at the mud, at the lioness, at the cub now quiet in Maggie's arms, still staring at her mother. "She doesn't have an hour." "I know." Derek's voice had lost its edge. "I know she doesn't." Thomas walked to the equipment pile, picked up a coil of rope, heavy, 30 meters long. He began tying one end around his waist. Derek watched him. "What are you doing?" The harness slipped because no one was there to guide it. Thomas tested the knot, pulled it tight. "I'll go in, secure it properly, then you pull us both out. If that mud takes you, then I'll be right where she is." Thomas handed Derek the other end of the rope. Their eyes met. "If I go under, you pull. Don't wait. Don't think. Just pull." Derek's hands were shaking as he took the rope. For the first time all day, he didn't argue. Thomas turned toward the sinkhole. The mud waited. Red, thick, patient. He took his first step onto the broken platform. The broken platform creaked beneath Thomas's weight. He moved slowly, testing each plank before committing. The wood was slick with mud and morning dew. One wrong step, and he'd break through. Behind him, Derek held the rope. Thomas could feel the tension not too tight, not too slack. Good. The kid was paying attention. The edge of the sinkhole gaped 3 feet ahead. Thomas stopped at the last stable plank. Looked down. The mud was darker than he'd expected, almost black in the shadows, shifting to rust red where the sun hit. It moved sluggishly, like something breathing. The smell rose up, iron and rot and something older, the smell of things buried. The lioness lay motionless. Only her nostrils and the top of her head broke the surface now. Her eyes were closed. The sedative had taken full hold. Thomas gripped the harness straps, canvas and leather, heavy in his hands. He slung them over his shoulder. "Going in," he called back. His voice sounded strange, distant. He stepped off the platform. The mud swallowed his boot instantly. Cold, colder than he'd expected, a shock that traveled up his leg and settled in his spine. He pulled his foot forward. The clay resisted, gripping like a fist. Each step required his full weight, his full strength, knee deep now. The mud pressed against his legs from all sides. Moving became a negotiation. Lean forward. Shift weight, pull, repeat. Sweat broke out across his forehead despite the cold, thigh deep. The pressure increased. His breath came harder. He could feel his heartbeat in his ears, rapid and loud. "Doing okay?" Derek's voice, distant. Thomas didn't waste breath answering. He focused on the lioness. 10 feet away. 8. 6. The mud reached his waist. His movements slowed to a crawl. Every inch forward cost him something: energy, warmth, certainty. The rope behind him went taut, then slack, then taut again as Derek adjusted. 4 feet, 3, he reached the lioness. Up close, she was enormous, even trapped, even sedated. Her size stole his breath. Her shoulder was level with his chest. Her paws, buried somewhere beneath the surface, were as wide as dinner plates. He could see the scar on her left shoulder, now old, healed over, a raised line of pale tissue cutting through the golden fur. She's fought before, survived before. Thomas placed his hand on her neck. The fur was matted with mud, rough against his palm. Beneath it, he felt heat, muscle, the slow, steady rhythm of her pulse. "I've got you," he said. The words came out hoarse, quiet. "I've got you." He unslung the harness and went to work. The straps had to go under her forelegs and around her chest. That meant reaching into the mud, digging. The clay sucked at his arms as he pushed down, searching for the contours of her body beneath the surface. His fingers found her leg, massive, solid. He worked the first strap underneath, pulling it through inch by inch. The mud fought him for every movement. His shoulders burned, his hands cramped. The hospital room, white walls, the sound of machines, the chair beside her bed, empty. He shook his head, focused. The second strap, around her chest. He had to lean across her body, pressing his own weight against hers to get the angle right. Mud squelched between them. He could feel her ribs now slightly visible beneath the coat. Dry season had been hard on everyone. She asked for me twice. The nurses said she asked for me. The harness was in place. He checked the connections, tugged each strap. Solid. "Ready!" he shouted. His voice cracked on the word. Behind him, he heard Samuel fire up the crane. The engine roared. The cable went taut. The mud did not want to let go. Thomas felt it first in his own body, the sudden pull upward as the rope around his waist caught the tension. His feet lifted from the clay. For one terrible moment, he hung suspended, neither rising nor falling, caught between the crane's power and the earth's grip. The lioness began to move. Slowly. So slowly. The mud released her 1 inch at a time, each giving accompanied by a wet, sucking sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Her forelegs emerged, first massive paws caked in red clay, then her shoulders, her ribs. Thomas held on to the harness. His arms screamed, his grip slipped, caught, slipped again. He locked his fingers through the straps and held on. The crane groaned. The cable stretched, and then movement, real movement. The lioness rose from the mud like something being born. Clay streamed from her coat. Her hindquarters emerged. Then her tail, matted and heavy. They cleared the surface. Thomas felt the swing as the crane arm lifted them both, him still clinging to the harness. Her suspended in the straps like some great golden cargo. The world tilted. Sky, earth, the faces of the crew below. Everything spun. Then solid ground. The crane operator lowered them onto the stable earth beyond the sinkhole. Thomas's knees buckled as his feet touched down. He released the harness and stumbled back, chest heaving. His arms hung like dead weight. His knees buckled twice before he steadied himself. Mud covered him from waist to boots. His hands were raw, scraped by the straps. Maggie was there instantly. She dropped beside the lioness, medical bag open, hands moving with practiced speed. Stethoscope, pulse check, airway clear. She's stable. Maggie's voice carried across the group. Vitals are strong. She's going to make it. Someone cheered. Samuel, maybe. Others joined in scattered applause, voices raised in relief. Thomas didn't hear them. He was on his hands and knees in the dirt. His arms shook. His lungs heaved. He stared at the ground between his hands, red clay, dry grass, his own blood from the cub's bite still seeping between his fingers. The cub. He looked up. She had broken free from where Maggie had set her down. She ran across the open ground on unsteady legs, straight for her mother. She reached the lioness's side and pressed her small body against the massive flank. Her tongue darted out, licking the mud from her mother's face. Over and over, frantic, desperate. Thomas watched. His chest felt strange, tight, then loose, then tight again. Something was shifting inside him, something that had been locked in place for 8 years. I made it. This time, I made it. He sat back on his heels, wiped his face with his forearm, leaving a streak of mud across his cheek. The sun was directly overhead now. Hot, bright, he closed his eyes against it. Footsteps approached. Derek's voice. Thomas, can you hear me? He opened his eyes. The younger ranger stood above him, face tight with something Thomas couldn't read. You're an idiot, Derek said. You know that. Right. You could have died in there. Thomas looked up at him, said nothing. Derek's expression shifted, cracked. You could have died, and He stopped, swallowed. I couldn't have pulled you out. The rope, the angle if you'd gone under. I couldn't have. But you held on. Derek blinked. You held the rope, Thomas said. That's all I asked. Something passed between them. Not forgiveness, there was nothing to forgive. Not understanding that would come later, or not at all. Just acknowledgement, recognition. Two men standing in the same dirt, covered in the same mud. Derek extended his hand. Thomas took it, let the younger man pull him to his feet. They stood together, watching Maggie work on the lioness. The cub had stopped licking. She lay curled against her mother's side now, one paw resting on the massive chest, rising and falling with each breath. How long until she wakes up? Derek asked. Maggie checked her watch. 15, maybe 20 minutes. And then, Maggie looked at the lioness, at the cub, at the open savanna stretching in every direction. Then we back off and let nature take its course. Thomas nodded. He understood. They had done what they could. The rest was not up to them. He turned to walk back toward the vehicles, to find water and bandages for his hand. Behind him, without warning, the lioness's eyes snapped open. The lioness surged upward. No warning, no transition. One moment she lay motionless, sedated, peaceful. The next, 400 pounds of muscle and terror erupted from the earth. Her roar split the air, a sound so deep and primal that it stopped Thomas's heart mid-beat. The ground vibrated beneath his boots. Birds exploded from the grass in every direction. The crew scattered. Samuel dove behind the crane. 2 rangers ran for the supply truck. Derek stumbled backward over a coil of rope and hit the ground hard. Only Maggie held her position, backing away slowly, hands raised, palms out. The lioness didn't see her, didn't see any of them. She saw only threat shapes, movement, noise. Her pupils were blown wide. Foam flecked her muzzle. Every muscle in her body trembled with the force of her panic. She ran, not at anyone, just away, toward the open savanna, toward silence. Her massive body crashed through the tall grass, leaving a trail of flattened stalks behind her. The cub scrambled to follow, her small legs pumped. She ran harder than Thomas had ever seen her run, harder than when she'd found his truck, harder than when she'd paced the edge of the pit. She gave everything she had. It wasn't enough. The lioness was 50 meters away, 100, 150. She didn't slow, didn't look back. The tall grass swallowed her whole. The cub stopped. She stood in the middle of the open ground, chest heaving, small body shaking. She looked at the grass where her mother had disappeared, looked back at the humans, looked at the grass again. Then she sat down. Alone. Thomas felt his legs give out. He didn't fall, not exactly. His knees just stopped working. One moment he was standing, the next he was on the ground, palms pressed flat against the dirt, head hanging between his shoulders. His chest heaved. Once, twice. A sound came out of his throat, half gasp, half something else, something worse. He did everything right. The thought came unbidden, sharp-edged, merciless, risked his life, went into the mud, pulled her out with his own hands. And she still ran, she still left her cub behind. Just like the sob hit him before he could stop it. Loud, ugly. The kind of sound a man makes when he's been holding something for years and can't hold it anymore. He covered his face with his hands. The mud on his palms smeared across his cheeks. He could taste it, grit and iron and salt from his own tears mixing together. This is not how rangers behave. The thought came from somewhere far away. Some part of him still watching, still judging. This is not professional. This is weakness. Everyone is watching. Everyone can see. He couldn't stop. Derek was staring. Thomas could feel his eyes without looking up. The younger ranger, with his protocols and efficiency. Watching his senior colleague fall apart in the dirt. Watching 8 years of reputation dissolve in a series of broken sounds. What must he think? What must any of them think? The patient one. The one who tracked a zebra for 2 days. The one who never asked for a full deployment. Look at him now, on his knees, crying like a child. The shame burned worse than the grief, hot and acidic, spreading through his chest. Maggie approached. He heard her footsteps, felt her kneel beside him. Her hand rested on his shoulder, warm, steady, saying nothing. But she was witnessing this. That was enough. Another person seeing him broken. Another memory he would have to carry. Thomas! Derek's voice, closer now. Thomas! She's safe. You did it. The lioness. She left her. The words came out jagged, torn. Derek stopped. What? She left her cub behind. Thomas's hands dropped from his face. He stared at the dirt between his knees. Mud and tears dripped from his chin. She ran away, and she didn't even look back. She didn't. His voice cracked, shattered, just like Mom. She didn't know I was coming. She gave up before I could get there. And now I've spent 8 years trying to prove I could save something, anything, and it doesn't matter. None of it matters. I couldn't save her then. I can't save anyone now. He pressed his palms against his eyes. The pressure hurt. Good. He wanted it to hurt. Maggie's hand squeezed his shoulder. Thomas, listen to me. That's the sedative talking. The disorientation. She doesn't know where she is. She doesn't know. Then why did she run? His voice rose, raw, desperate. Why didn't she take her cub? Why didn't she? He couldn't finish. The cub. He looked up, searched for her through blurred vision. She was still there, sitting in the dust, still staring at the grass where her mother had vanished, waiting for something that might never come back. Thomas's chest contracted. The parallel was too clear, too cruel. Two creatures, waiting for mothers who left, who didn't look back, who disappeared into the distance without a word. He had done everything, given everything, and in the end, it came down to this: a man on his knees in the mud, crying in front of his colleagues, while a cub waited alone for a mother who might never return. Derek stood apart, silent, his expression unreadable. Thomas waited for the judgment, the dismissal, the quiet filing away of this moment to be used later. Did you hear about Callahan broke down in the field? Couldn't handle it, but Derek said nothing. And somehow, that silence was worse than words, because it meant he didn't know what to say. It meant this was beyond professional critique, beyond protocol. This was just pity. Thomas bent forward. His forehead touched the dirt. Red clay pressed against his skin, stuck to his tears, filled his nostrils with the smell of iron. This is who I am. After everything. After 8 years, this is all I am. A man who couldn't save his mother. A man who couldn't keep a lioness with her cub. A man who went into the mud and came out with nothing but his own grief. He lay there, forehead in the dirt, arms limp at his sides. The sun pressed down on his back. The silence pressed down on everything else. The cub made a sound, high, sharp, not a mule this time, not desperation. Something else. Thomas lifted his head. The cub was looking at the grass, not with despair, with attention. Thomas pushed himself up from the dirt. His arms shook. His face was streaked with mud and tears, and he didn't care anymore. Something in the cub's posture had changed. Something in the way she held her small body. He followed her gaze. The grass was moving, not wind. The air was still. This movement came from within stalks parting, bending, pushed aside by something large. The lioness emerged. She walked slowly this time, deliberately. The panic had drained from her eyes. Her muscles no longer trembled. She moved like what she was, a queen returning to her territory. The cub ran to her. Thomas watched the reunion from his knees. The cub pressed against her mother's forelegs, pushed her small head into the massive chest. The lioness bent down and began to lick rough, thorough strokes across the cub's face and back, cleaning, claiming. She came back. The thought arrived without fanfare. Simple, true. Thomas didn't move, didn't stand. He stayed where he was, kneeling in the red dirt, watching a mother find her child. The lioness lifted her head. She looked at him, not at Maggie, not at Derek, not at the scattered crew or the crane or the vehicles, at him. Thomas stopped breathing. Her eyes were amber, clear now, free from the haze of sedation. They held no fear, no aggression, just recognition. One creature acknowledging another. She knew. Somehow, impossibly. She knew. 3 seconds passed. 4. 5. The lioness blinked. Slow. Deliberate. The way cats do when they feel safe. When they trust. Thomas's chest hitched. She came back for her cub. She didn't abandon her. She was lost, confused, afraid. But when she found herself again, she came back. His hands pressed into the dirt. The mud squelched between his fingers, cold, gritty, real. He stared at those hands. The blood from the cub's bite had dried. The scrapes from the harness straps had scabbed over. These hands that had pulled a lioness from the earth. These hands that had been 2,000 miles away when his mother died. But I was on a plane. The thought rose up. Unbidden. I was on a plane. I was coming. I didn't make it in time, but I was trying. I was always trying. He had told himself for 8 years that he had failed, that he should have left earlier, flown faster, been there when it mattered, that his mother died alone because he wasn't good enough, fast enough, present enough, but he was on a plane. He was coming. She didn't know I was on a plane. She didn't know I was 3 hours away. She thought. He stopped. What did she think? He had never asked. Never let himself imagine it from her side. It had always been about his failure, his guilt, his inability to be there when she needed him. But his mother had known him for 50 years. She had watched him grow up, watched him become a teacher, watched him leave for Africa. She knew who he was. Maybe she knew I was trying. Maybe she didn't need me to be there. Maybe she just needed to know I would have come if I could. The lioness turned, nudged her cub forward with her muzzle. Together, they began to walk toward the tall grass. Thomas stayed on his knees, watching, coming back. That's what matters. Trying. Even when you fail. Even when you don't make it in time. Even when the one you love doesn't know you're on the way. The trying matters. The lioness paused at the edge of the grass, looked back one more time. Thomas raised his hand, a small gesture, acknowledgement. She held his gaze for one more heartbeat, then she stepped into the grass, her cub at her heels, and disappeared. The savannah went quiet. Thomas let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. His shoulders dropped, his hands unclenched. The tightness that had lived in his chest for 8 years began to ease. She came back. Maybe Mom knew I was coming too. Maybe that was enough. He reached for his shirt pocket. The handkerchief was still there, muddy now, soaked through, but still there. He pulled it out, unfolded it for the first time in 8 years. A small slip of paper fell into his palm. Thomas stared at it. His mother's handwriting faded. Familiar. The loops and curves he had known his whole life. Tommy, I'm so proud of who you're becoming. Don't ever doubt that. Love always. Mom. His breath caught. She had tucked it inside the handkerchief, the last gift she ever gave him, and he had carried it for 8 years without looking, without unfolding it all the way, because he was afraid of what he might find, or afraid of what he might not. But she had left this for him, knowing him, trusting him. I'm so proud of who you're becoming. Not who you were, not who you are, who you're becoming. She knew. She always knew. Thomas folded the paper carefully, tucked it back into the handkerchief, pressed the bundle against his chest. Footsteps behind him. Derek's voice, quieter than before. Thomas, I was wrong. Thomas didn't turn around. His eyes stayed on the grass where the lioness had vanished. I thought you were being reckless, like my father. Derek's voice wavered, cracked. But my father didn't die because he cared too much. He died because he was alone. Nobody backing him up? Nobody holding the rope? Thomas stood, slowly. His legs still shook, but they held. I kept thinking if he'd just stayed objective, kept his distance, but maybe. Derek stopped, started again. Maybe if someone had been there with him, he'd still be here. Thomas turned, looked at the younger man. Derek's eyes were red, his jaw was clenched, his hands hung at his sides. No clipboard, no radio, just empty palms. Caring doesn't get you killed, Derek. Thomas's voice came out rough, worn, but steady. Going it alone might. Derek nodded, once, twice. Maggie appeared beside them. She looked at Thomas, really looked. At the mud on his face, the tears still drying, the handkerchief clutched against his chest. You all right? Thomas looked at the savannah, at the sky, at his own muddy hands. I think I might be. The sun hung low over the Serengeti, painting the sky in shades of copper and gold. Thomas sat on the steps of his cabin, watching the colors deepen. His shirt was still stiff with dried mud. His face still streaked with clay where he'd wiped his tears. He hadn't changed yet. Hadn't washed. The dirt felt like evidence of something he wasn't ready to let go. Around the camp, the crew gathered in small groups, coffee in tin cups, low voices, the easy exhaustion that comes after hard work done well. Samuel was telling the story of the rescue to a ranger who'd arrived late, hands moving, voice rising at the dramatic parts. The others listened, nodded, added their own details. Thomas didn't join them. The handkerchief lay in his lap. He had unfolded it again, smoothing the creases with his thumb. His mother's note rested on top that familiar handwriting. Those simple words. I'm so proud of who you're becoming. He read it again. And again. Each time. The words settled a little deeper. Footsteps on the wooden steps. Maggie lowered herself beside him with a soft grunt. She carried 2 cups of coffee, handed one to him without asking. Thanks. She nodded, looked out at the sunset, said nothing for a while. Thomas sipped the coffee. Strong. Bitter. Exactly right. Walter used to say something, Maggie said finally. Her voice was quiet, conversational. My husband, he'd say, Maggie, you can't save everyone, but you can make sure everyone knows someone tried. Thomas turned the cup in his hands. The metal was warm against his palms. I think she knew, he said. My mother. I think she knew I was coming. Maggie looked at him. Maybe she did. I'll never know for sure. He paused, watched a pair of birds cut across the orange sky. But I know I was coming, and I reckon that's going to have to be enough. The radio inside the communications tent crackled. Derek's voice carried across the quiet camp. Thomas? Maggie, you're going to want to see this. They rose, walked together across the packed earth to the tent, inside. Derek stood in front of a monitor, his face lit by the glow. On the screen, night vision footage played in grainy green and white, a camera trap positioned somewhere in the eastern sector. 2 shapes moved through the tall grass. The lioness walked with her head high. Her stride was strong, unhurried. Beside her, matching her pace step for step. The cub trotted along. Their bodies brushed against each other as they moved shoulder to flank, mother to daughter. They were heading northeast, toward the rocky outcrops where the pride made their territory. Going home, together. Thomas watched the footage loop, watched the lioness pause, her head turning toward the camera as if she sensed its presence, watched the cub press closer to her mother's side. Derek leaned back in his chair, ran a hand through his hair. I've been doing this job wrong. Maggie glanced at him. How so? Kept thinking conservation was about numbers, population data, genetic diversity. He shook his head slowly. But it's not about the species, is it? It's about her, that one lioness, that one cub, every single one. Thomas nodded. Takes a while to figure that out. Derek looked at him. My father knew. I just wasn't listening. The footage continued to loop. The lioness and her cub, walking through the moonlit grass, safe, together, alive. Thomas stepped out of the tent. The night air was cool against his face. Stars were beginning to appear scattered at first, then thickening, filling the sky. He walked to his Land Cruiser, opened the glove compartment. The phone sat where it always sat. Dead battery. Cracked screen. 3 years of saved voicemails. locked inside forever. He picked it up, held it in his palm. For a long moment, he stood there. The weight of it, the memory of it, of his mother's voice, trapped in circuits that would never work again. Just calling to hear your voice, Tommy. Call me back when you can. He had carried this for 8 years. Carried the guilt, the regret, the endless loop of what he should have done differently, but she had left him a note, tucked it into a handkerchief, trusted him to find it when he was ready. I'm so proud of who you're becoming. Thomas walked back to his cabin, opened the drawer beside his bed, placed the phone inside, closed the drawer, not forgetting, just finally letting it rest. He set the handkerchief on his nightstand, unfolded. His mother's words visible in the lamplight. He lay down. The mattress creaked beneath his weight. His muscles ached shoulders, arms, back. Good pain, earned pain, outside. Somewhere in the darkness, a lioness roared, not in fear, not in pain, just announcing herself to the night, letting the world know she was there. Thomas closed his eyes. His hand found the edge of the handkerchief. Fingers brushed the worn fabric, and Thomas Callahan slept. No dreams, just dark, just rest. For the first time in 8 years, that was enough. If something in this story left you quiet, that's all right. Some things settle in the chest and stay there for a while. They don't need names. They don't need explaining. They just need room. Many of us have carried things we never talk about. A phone call we didn't make, a trip we didn't take in time, a person we loved who never knew how hard we were trying. We hold these things close, and we keep moving, and sometimes we wonder if anyone else understands. They do. More than you might think. Perhaps you've been that person, the one still reaching, the one still coming even when it seemed too late. Perhaps you've wondered if your trying ever mattered to anyone. It did. It does. You don't need to make peace with everything tonight. Some things are allowed to stay unfinished. Some questions don't need answers to stop hurting. It's enough to have sat here, to have listened, to have remembered something tender and let it breathe. Thank you for staying until the end. Thank you for carrying this story with me, even just for a little while.